Okay, we are live. We're going to be talking about conclusions versus clarity. And if you're feeling sluggish or you're just starting your path, this is a great seed to understand because a lot of people get absolutely stuck in this area. And it can happen anywhere along the path. And so if you're there, hopefully this is a wake-up call that you're doing it again, or you may not even realize you're doing this. But what you will feel, what you will experience is if you're trying to come to conclusions on your path, you will tie yourself to concepts, you'll tie yourself to relationships, you'll tie yourself without getting the clarity. So the idea is that we're waking up. And so what are we waking up from? And it's this simple. What we are learning on a spiritual path or a path of enlightenment, whatever it is, we are learning to come in resonance with what is unconscious. The unconscious is because what do we know? We know what we're aware of, what we're conscious of, and then if you want, there's a point where you have to understand that there's things that we don't know, because there's things that we think that we don't know, but then there's also things that we don't know that we don't know. And so basically what we're trying to do is open up and expand our relationship to consciousness itself. We're trying to make the unconscious conscious, to be liberated, to be free, to be not attached, to live without the ego mind and the analyzing. And so that's a very simple distinction right there to make. Conclusions are very ego-minded. They're very analytical, and we can get stuck in concepts. Codependency and narcissism is a great example of people getting stuck in that stage. Some people get so stuck that or they're not even really on a path yet. If you're playing with concepts like psychology, narcissism, codependency, and so what a lot of people do is they learn that control psychology, but then they look outside to externalize it. So basically, what they say is they find out that they were in a relationship with a narcissist. So they go out and they learn everything about a narcissist, when what they really should be doing is figuring out why they were a codependent in that. And so this is that validation from the outside. So then they villainize the narcissist and go out and, but they're not moving. They're not going anywhere. They're not making, the only thing they're doing is creating a right and wrong story, an analytical story of who is the villain today. And it's the right and wrong story. And, that's where people are. But all my videos are about detaching and becoming your authentic self, because your authentic self is underneath all of the psychology. You actually don't need to know concepts like codependency and narcissism to actually just get yourself out of that place. There's just the experience of life will teach us when we're giving ourselves away or when we're taking too much from other people. And so the path is about expansion. So that's a great example of a dense experience with conclusions. Because what are you doing? You're constantly using the analytical mind in order to come to conclusions about who you are and who other people are. And you are stuck in a story. You're stuck in that narrative. And so I kind of want to explain how we go about recognizing that this is happening and what we can do about it. How can we get to clarity versus conclusions? The first thing is be aware of what you want to talk about, because that is a really great place to figure out what's going on, because you have an internal story going inside, and then what are you trying to talk about? So if you're trying to talk about an ex being a narcissist, you're going to sit down and talk to everybody about them being a narcissist, and that is where your story is going to be. And then you will be in this analytical mind trying to figure out who the narcissist is. So we want to, the idea is we want to be able to see above that. So if we just say that this is how we would gain, if we're going for conclusions, we may get some clarity along the way. It may just go like, well, this is like medium right here. This is when we're at a lower stage. We call it a contracted stage. This is basically when we are blinded by our emotional state. This would be neutral. And then above that is our buoyancy level. Okay, so when we're coming to conclusions, what'll happen on a spiritual path, and I'm just going to take somebody that's like a medium, like clarity and conclusion. And so what'll end up happening is that they'll make their path a priority. However, they're still stuck in the story. So what'll end up happening is they'll have some kind of experience which will offer a little bit of clarity and a lot of conclusion, and so they'll go from this neutral state or a contracted state, say like a dark night of the soul or something like that. Then they'll come up just a little above neutral, and they walk away, and they love to talk about. This person would want to talk about all the things that they concluded about it. They'll talk about finding their codependency, their narcissism, having a traumatic event as a kid, what they showed up within a relationship. But what ends up happening is this is very short-lived with conclusions, because if you're doing conclusions, you're going to be part of that next narrative. In that same narrative. So you'll get that cool little, I figured this out, and then you're going to want to tell everybody about it. And then you'll drop down into another bout of being contracted emotionally. And then you'll come up a little bit and contract and up a little bit and contract up a little bit. So the idea is, how do we free ourselves from that? Well, stop coming to conclusions. Start broadening our perspective. So using the example of control psychology, which is just narcissism and codependency, when we get into trying to figure out exactly and conclude what behavior we're having that is codependent or narcissistic, we begin to get into the weeds, and we begin to analyze ourselves and way overanalyze ourselves. This is about this, and this is about this, and this is about this. And you just keep coming to conclusion after conclusion after conclusion. But the thing is that we're not getting that bump. We're not getting that bump into clarity. This is this buoyancy. And so when I'm talking about this scale, what I'm talking about is really our awareness field. So what is our awareness field? So what we understand is that the right-wrong world, which is paradigm A, which is really popular right now, getting less popular, which is very cool. People are waking up to paradigm B. But when we're in that world and we're doing the conclusion thing, we overanalyze. I'm sorry, I went off on a train that I didn't want to go off of. Let me bring it back. What I wanted to talk about is the tangibility. What's really important to me is what's the tangible understanding of our relationship. So when I'm doing this, I'm talking about these are our contracted states, and these are our buoyancy states. And then we come to a neutral point of view. So in my terms, the way that I simplify psychology, or this function, the emotional guidance system, is that our emotions are what is unconscious to us, and feelings are what are conscious to us. So the practice, from my point of view, is to turn emotions into feelings. And that's the process of working with our emotional guidance system. This is getting out of the linear mind now and analyzing everything. We know when it's an emotion because it discombobulates us. It makes us, it contracts us. We feel the contraction. So if we understand the first part of really understanding how this works is to have an understanding and awareness of what our emotional states are. Because some people's emotional state, they don't even get to neutral. They will live in a dense reality, and they will go down lower and then back up to this dense within this dense reality. So having awareness, like what are you able to experience? Are you able to experience really, really low contracted states and then really, really high clarifying states? And how do we know it's clarifying? Well, we've turned the emotional. We don't have a lot of emotions going on. We have a lot of feelings going on. And in that state, we have clarity, like we can see through problems. So if you're give an example of this is like if you're in an argument with a spouse or somebody else and you are mad and you are that means you're in an emotional state. Well, what does that emotional state? It actually brings us down, it contracts us, and then it limits. So then it limits our clarity. And so it's like the fog of war would be a really good analogy for that. Is that when we're in these contracted states, we just can't see. I just went through a period of a contraction earlier, and when I was in the contraction, I recognized I was in the contraction. Because so when we get in that contracted state, that's when we start getting wiggly, and we're like, I don't want to be in this lower feel. I want my vision back. Because once we practice enough, we understand what clarity feels like, and it's like, gosh, I want to get back there. But we have to understand, and we have to come to peace with these contracted states because it's part of the consciousness journey. It gives us, life gives us experiences to contract us. So it will show us how do we respond when we're in these contracted emotions. Do we go out and just spew all the thoughts and the analysis that we have about the other person? Do we just tell everybody in the world? That's a really good sign that you're in a contracted state, is like you want to make them into a villain and you are somehow their victim. But it's when we get in these higher clearing states, we see that some kind of the dynamic that's going on, but we can't see that dynamic. So that's why we're always saying, take some time. If you're upset, that's when we should be working in relationship. So let's focus on what we want. What we want is to make the unconscious conscious. And if we want to be liberated, if we want to let go of attachments that aren't ours, to be our authentic self, to move with much more grace in the world, if we want to expand love and compassion, clarity is key. Clarity is key. Clarity is key. And you'll get addicted to it because clarity is amazing. Because when we are super clear, that is when we actually open. So basically what we're doing in our work, because I say work like this because it's work at first, and then once we realize that this is liberating us, it is no longer work, it is our play. It is like, oh my gosh, this is an amazing system. I can free myself and I can be lighter and enjoy life. I can be buoyant. I can be joyful, gleeful, happy, content, peaceful, all of these different aspects of being human, and we can make our experience as a human a great one. And so how do we know this? How do we work with this function? Be aware. That's probably the biggest one. Be aware if you're coming to conclusions. If you're coming to conclusions, you just want to share that you figured it out, and you need to let everybody know exactly how you've mapped it out. And then the problem with doing that, talk about it, it's so interesting. The function is when we make that conclusion, we have already said that our next adventure is going to be connected to that one. And so we're tethering ourselves to a conclusion from the past. So we're attaching ourselves to the past when the thing that we want is the experience of buoyancy and amazingness and deliciousness and juiciness. So recognize, what do you want to talk about when you're going through these ahas? Because it's not like we can't talk about our emotions and our feelings, but get really general. Just say, if somebody says, look, what did you find in your last, on your last little bit with contraction? What was your aha? Get general. Say it feels like it was something about people pleasing, or it could have been connected to a piece of trauma from my past. But when we start adding a bunch of details to this, that is only seeding the analytical mind to stay tethered to that story and attach us to a conclusion that is almost 100% wrong, because we actually don't have the capacity within our logical linear mind in order to come to these conclusions. We don't know what all these emotions are about. We can just then put our mind on the process, and the process is turning emotions into feelings. So when we're in a contracted state, we're experiencing an emotion. That's not when we're trying to wiggle out of it. If you're really trying to get clear, you're sitting in that motion, you're soaking in that motion, you're getting out of your analytical mind and allowing the emotion to arise within you. And this is what happens when people are bypassing or not on a path at all, is they will just do anything to outrun that emotion. They will change the circumstances, and eventually it will catch up. So how do we get to clarity? Let go of conclusions. Let go of the story of what you think is happening. Don't try to impress people with the conclusions and the analysis and your connection to concepts. Concepts are nice little pointings. Like, I talk in concepts sometimes too, but they're pointings. Don't take them seriously. Don't latch onto them and think that this is the only way and that we have to hold on to those concepts. Because the idea is we really don't need any concepts. If we truly understood the process, we would just simply start experiencing life. Get present would be the next part, and then experience life, and then allow the contractions and the clarity to just keep moving you up. That's the whole idea. And so when you're in a clarity, boy, your spiritual ahas will like 180 your perspective. You'll just be like, wow, you're able to see so much more. And it is incredible, because that is the expansion. So that's a good idea too, is to take our mind off of growth. Stop trying to analyze the growth that we're going through. It doesn't matter. That's all just spiritual ego. That's all just trying to find a foundation, trying to find an interest in a story. Let go of that. Let go of the growth aspect of it and go on an expansion journey. When you're going on an expansion journey, what you're really saying is, there is things that I'm unconscious of, and I want to make them conscious. I want to be conscious of them. It's a joyful, playful experience. And so that's one of the greatest things, is to do this. So how does this work? So the idea is that when we become present, that's where we can get to a neutral place. This is where our system, we have feelings running through our system, we find contentment, we find peace. And this can be just this beautiful sense of presence. Now, presence can also have lots of other experiences like joy and happiness and gleefulness, and we have lots of things that can arise, beautiful sensations that can arise from presence. And so that's that buoyancy. So the idea is, and this is the thing, is we're always trying to outrun the contractions, because life hands us things to show us more, to reveal more for us, so it puts us in a contracted state. So the idea is to understand when we're in the contracted state, that's when the work happens. Or another way to look at it, that's when the play happens. It's like, okay, I am going down. Now we can see this in a day. So we could start the day and we're just fired up and we're doing really well. But then by the end of the day, we just start losing a little bit of that excitement, and we'll have a little bit of contraction from the end of the day. And that's that moment where, let's say that you're in a relationship and you're actually on a good conscious path, that you have some self-awareness. Let's say you get home and you are a little bit contracted. This is when we can tell. We can share with our partner, hey, I'm in a contracted state. And the whole idea of telling them that and as understanding is whatever feedback they're going to get from me is going to be from a limited perspective. The greatest perspective they're going to get from me is when I am present and I am in a buoyant state. I'm in a state of clarity. And so that's a great way to monitor that. But we can also just let it be our game. Our game is to become conscious, to find clarity, and we're going to find it through clarity. So we're going to have these contractions, understand when we're there. We're going to sit in our emotions, whatever that takes to turn those emotions into feelings. And this is the time to also either have a good person, like somebody like myself who's a reflective intuitive. This is what I do, is help people when they're contracted to find these ways of looking so that their clarity is opens and they can expand, because people will go into those contracted states and they'll get lost and they'll get depressed and they'll feel like they're still measuring and they're slugging along on their path. And the idea is if we work on this system, your path will seem so much faster than a growth path. An expansion path will be so much faster because we're focusing on expansion. We're not focusing on the linear, which is basically we're dragging along things from our past in order to compare them to things in our future. So when we're in these contracted states, this is when we do the work. This is when we sit in the emotions. We find out what they're for, what they're sitting there for. And when that clarity comes from that experience and we get good at that, that's when we're going to pop up and have these levels of clarity. And it's also, and I call it vibrancy, it'd be another way to say it, but I always think of it as buoyancy. I'm always wanting to communicate with people when I'm in a neutral or buoyant state. That's kind of my rule for myself. And if I'm not at least neutral, I want to let people know, hey, I'm not real clear right now. So what I share might not be the best. So don't hang on to that. Clarity over conclusions. Expansion over growth. These are great seeds to skyrocket you to whatever it is you're chasing. Are you chasing the high-flying disc with Abraham Hicks? Or are you following your joy, Bashar? Or the myriad of other narratives that are playing out in the new world, the new earth that is coming in? But it's all everything is very tangible. That's what I like to do, is just bring things back to a tangible thing so we can catch ourselves when we're getting caught up in concepts, and allowing ourselves to let go of the attachment to concepts, let go of this attachment to conclusions, and just start experiencing life. So may you have a buoyant day. If you have any comments or questions, I always love feedback. That's part of my joy. Please do that. Visit paradigmb.org.